think all videos about the Twilight Zone are legally obligated to start with the Rod Sterling impression, so here we go. Imagine, if you will, a realm not too dissimilar from the one you call your own. Everything seems the same, but there's something not quite right. Maybe it's a persistent dream you keep having, slowly seeming more real every night, or faces you knew from your past reaching through time to warn you of impending doom, or a connection you've made recently turning out to be not what you thought it was. The Twilight Zone has become a cultural icon, becoming verbal shorthand for when you feel something is too strange to be real, often in a bad way. That being said, Twilight Zone episodes have a wide range of weirdness and outcomes, ranging from as tame as a man interacting with fate personified, allowing him to learn a lesson on the value of human life, to as strange as a man who gets chastised for his love of reading, getting locked in a vault during a nuclear fallout, giving him time and freedom to read only to break his extremely thick glasses. That was the first Twilight Zone I remember. It always confused me why the wife was so mad at him for reading. Suffice it to say, there's a wide range of what the Twilight Zone can give and take. But which episode of the Twilight Zone is the most... In this video, I'm going to be looking through Season 1 of the classic Twilight Zone series to figure out which episode is the most Twilight Zone. To do this, I've selected 4 key aspects to rank that, when added together, will give a Twilight score. The higher the score, the more the episode represents the terrific horror of the Twilight Zone. Now you're probably asking what the aspects are that make a great episode, and to that I will introduce you to the Twilight ranking system. As any good YouTuber should, I've taken my major idea and turned it into an anagram-based ranking system from 1 to 5 to make it catchy, comparable, and easy to understand. T is theme. Does the horror of the episode relate to the protagonist's underlying issues, and do they learn from this? A 1 means that there's no real good connection between the main character's problem and the weirdness that goes on. 3 is where we get a real connection, but the character never really says it out loud. And 5 is where we get a connection and the main character understands and internalizes the lesson imparted on them in the Twilight Zone. The major difference between 3, 4, and 5 is that 3 has a connection, 4 has a monologue on why this has happened, but they reject the outcome, and 5 is where they accept the outcome. The better the connection and lesson, the higher the theme score. W is weirdness. How weird is the premise of the episode? This is the most malleable ranking, and I'll try my best to explain it. Most of the ranking will come from originality and twist. A basic time machine itself is a little weird on its own, but a time machine that teleports you to a specific historical event, a time machine built by dinosaurs, a time machine that takes you to see the dinosaurs only to find out they were aliens all along. Now we're getting weird. The easiest way I can explain this ranking is that a 3 required me to do a double take and a 5 left my mouth agape several times during the episode. I is individual. How bad is the outcome of the protagonist? At the end of the episode, how different of a person is the protagonist compared to where they started? Safe to say, if the protagonist dies at the end, the episode gets an individual score of 5. The middle of the score can be quite muddy, but I think my explanations make sense. If the protagonist smiles at the end of the episode, it can't be higher than a 2. 3 is for major need of therapy or minor physical injuries, and 4 is when the character will most likely die or have a negative quality of life after the episode ends. But we don't care about after the episode. Leave that to the fanfics. We only care about what is seen and told to us. Finally, L is large scale. How is the rest of the world affected by the Twilight Zone? If an episode's going to have a low score, it'll most likely be this one. The more people affected by the Twilight Zone, the higher the large-scale score. I'll point out a couple of barriers now because they're a common occurrence in Twilight Zone episodes. If it only affects the protagonist, it's a 1. If there are individuals with magical powers roaming the world that could affect the average person the same way as the protagonist, it's a 2. If it affects an entire city or region of the world, or if there's a war going on, it's a 3. If the world is in constant torment, it's a 4. And if everyone's dead, it's a 5. Adding up all of these scores will give us a final Twilight score, and the highest score shall be dubbed the most Twilight Zone episode of the first season. I will say some aspects of this rating system causes otherwise well-made themes and stories to have a low overall score, but to counteract that, I'll rank same-scored episodes amongst themselves, like a tier list, with importance going towards the themes and weirdness levels. With all that cleared up, let's go through Season 1 of the Twilight Zone. Instead of going through the series chronologically, I'm going to go bottom up from least Twilight Zone to most. It's never fun having to decide at the bottom pick, but at least this season made it easy. The mighty Casey follows Mouth McGarry, the manager of the Hoboken Zephyrs. During spring training, McGarry meets Dr. Stillman and his extremely humanoid-looking robot Casey. After showing off Casey's remarkable prowess as a pitcher, McGarry hires him and cheats through a mission to win after win. During one game, Casey gets hit in the head and is taken off the field, where the team's doctor realizes he isn't human by finding out he doesn't have a heart. Because of this, the National League suspends Casey from play until he is given a heart, which they equate to making him human. His first game back, he fails to strike out a single batter due to his now having empathy for the other players. Casey leaves the team, looking to go into social work, and the narrator suggests afterward McGarry and Dr. Stillman move west and create an undefeated team of heartless, baseball-throwing robots. How do we score this? McGarry gets what he wants, a winning baseball team, but he doesn't realize or doesn't consider that Casey getting a heart is better than his pitching. I'll go with a 3. As for weirdness and individual scales, when robots are involved, their search for humanity comes with it, and McGarry ends up better off than he was before, so I'm going to give both of those a 1. And for the large scale, humanoid robots can exist, but right now they're just being used to cheat at baseball, so I'll give it a 2. I hope this gives a good example of how the ranking system works, and I'll only point out specific examples going forward, mostly talking about overall scores in relation to the other episodes. I Shot an Arrow into the Air tells the story of 3 astronauts, Donlin, Corey, and Pearson, on the first manned mission into space. Their ship ends up crashing onto a habitable asteroid, and they lose a majority of their crew. The surviving members fight over their rationed water, where it seems like Corey doesn't know what conserving water actually is. Like, he's spilling it all over his face. After a while, the crew splits up to find any form of food, water, or shelter, to which Corey returns without Pearson, causing Donlin to suspect foul play. He forces Corey to take him to Pearson's body, where Corey kills him in return, and shoots his canteen, wasting his water. Corey continues the search for anything, only to find that they crashed not on an asteroid, but on Earth, the same as they left it, only 97 miles away from Reno. I'm giving this a 4 for an individual because, at least Corey's still alive? Where Is Everybody was the first episode of the Twilight Zone that aired. In this episode, a man finds himself in a world with no people, unsure about who he is. As he roams the town, he finds strange occurrences, incoming calls and telephone booths, recently lit cigarettes, and theaters playing movies. He also learns that he was part of the Air Force. All of this accumulates in him spamming a walk button, begging for help. We then see his reality. He is an Air Force pilot in an average world, being studied for the effects isolation has on the brain, preparing him for travel to the moon. The episode ends with him smiling at the moon, saying he'll be there in a little while. In The Chaser, romantic and overall creep Roger Shackleford drugs the woman he's madly in love with a love potion, despite the protest of the professor who sells it to him.
If anybody gets hurt, it'll be you, but I don't expect you to believe me.
After their marriage, Shackleford finds her cooing over him unbearable, wishing he had never drugged her in the first place. What a wild concept. He returns to the professor, wishing to undo the potion. The professor sells him what he refers to as glove cleaner, learning that he'll only have one chance to do it. He attempts to undo the potion, but drops the new potion when he learns they are having a baby together. Woe is me, I took advantage of a woman, and now I have to live with the consequences. Nightmare as a Child follows Helen Foley as she is accompanied by, at first, a young girl who goes by Marky, and then a former employee of her late mother, Peter Selden. Selden brings up the tragic demise of her mother and asks if she remembers anything from that time, showing her a picture of herself, identical to the little girl, saying she also went by Marky at the time. After a longer conversation with her younger self, she unlocks memories she trapped behind her psyche. Selden turns to explain that he killed her mother and has returned to kill her as well.
It was me, Barry.
And then she throws him down the stairs. The episode ends with Helen telling a little girl never to lose her smile, smiling to herself. So, all that trauma that the rest of the episode had doesn't really matter, because she's smiling now. Mr. Denton on Doomsday stars the titular Al Denton, a washed-up cowboy who finds himself the owner of a gun that has the strangest knack for going off at the right time he needs it to. After being challenged by a gunslinger coming to town, he runs into Henry J. Fate, literally fate personified, who gives him a second chance at life with a potion that will make him the fastest gunslinger in the West. When the new gunslinger arrives, they stand off only to realize they have both drunk the potion, leading to a draw in which both their shooting hands get injured. Denton realizes that his second chance was not being the fastest gunslinger, but helping prevent the young man to not follow down the path his life went. One episode that I greatly enjoyed was Mr. Beavis. Mr. Beavis is described as
an oddball. His name is James B.W. Beavis, and his tastes lean toward stuffed animals, zither music, professional football, Charles Dickens, moose heads, carnivals, dogs, children, and young ladies. Mr. Beavis is accident-prone, a little vague, a little discombobulated, with a life that possesses all the security of a floating crap game.
Or a 1960s Pee Wee Herman. Look at him. Anyway, this episode shows Beavis' worst day, in which he gets fired, evicted, and his car crashes all on the same day. At the end of the day, he meets his guardian angel, who tells him he's going to redo the entire day where he gets all the best outcome. This, however, fundamentally changes Beavis' life, causing him to lose his whimsy and fun. Beavis explains to his angel that he enjoys the community and his fun over the safety of a comfortable lifestyle, choosing to return to his terrible day, but not alone, as his guardian angel returns his car to him, seemingly promising him aid in his life. For this one, I'll point out that unlike Doomsday, which had a personification of fate, Beavis gets a 2 in the weirdness because it directly references angels, bringing in the entirety of Christianity, which can lead to strange implications elsewhere, like who else has guardian angels, and what do they use them for? Keeping on with the Christianity theme, A Passage for Trumpet sees down on his luck trumpet player Joey Crown selling his trumpet after being kicked out of the club he once played at. Seeing no point in keeping on, he jumps in front of a truck, sending him into the Twilight Zone. He walks around trying to interact with people, only for them not to respond, causing him to conclude that he's a ghost. He runs into a trumpet player that tells him that actually everyone else is a ghost, and he's the one who's alive, And then, after a nice monologue where Joey talks about all the things he misses and what he'd do when he goes back to life, the stranger drops his name like he's in the post-credit scene of a Marvel movie.
My name? Call me Gabe.
Gabe.
Gabe. Short for Gabriel.
Now we come to a block I've lovingly called They're Dead, but otherwise it's okay. This includes Perchance to Dream, about a man who is haunted by a cat lady in his dreams, The Purple Testament, which follows a soldier in World War II who can see who's going to die before a battle, Execution, in which a cowboy on the brink of death is teleported to the future, A Nice Place to Visit, where a robber learns that getting everything he ever wants is more hellish than it is heavenly, and The Four of Us Are Dying, which shows a con man who steals several people's identity before being caught in a catch-22 and dying. Each of these stories have varying levels of themes and weirdness to it, but they are all heightened in their Twilight score by their protagonist dying at the end, whether they learned their lesson or if there was a lesson to be learned at all. The Big Tall Wish is the final episode with a rank of 11. It follows aging boxer Bully Jackson as he goes into another match. One kid who looks up to Bully, Henry Temple, tells him that he's going to make a big tall wish that Bully will win, to which Henry's mother confirms that those wishes do work. After being knocked to the ground in the match, Henry makes his wish, causing Bodhi to never hit the ground, winning instead. On his way home, he is praised by his community, and when he asks Henry about the wish, Henry reveals that he changed the outcome. Through Bodhi's non-belief in wishing, he undoes the wish, causing him to lose. He goes home again, this time dejected, and Henry says that he's done wishing because it doesn't exist, to which Bodhi rephrases,
Or maybe there is magic, and maybe there's wishes too. I guess the trouble is there's not enough people around to believe.
An otherwise heartwarming tone to end us with this half of the season. And When the Sky Was Open takes us to the next level of the Twilight Zone. In it, 3 astronauts who briefly disappeared from radar on a space mission are slowly decanonized from their reality, losing contact with their jobs, friends, and even their family for no discernible reason. The end of the episode posits that the world continues as if the men, their ship, and their journey never existed in the first place. The next 2 episodes take a similar path into the Twilight Zone through one of media. The 16mm Shrine sees former Hollywood starlet Barbara Trenton clinging to her youth through old films, with her as the leading lady. She rejects any statements informing her of the time passing by, ultimately wishing to be a part of her past life. She achieves her wish by being put into the reels of her films, getting to talk and interact with her former co-stars, refusing to age, and gaining immortality through the screen, with some connection to the real world. A World of Difference goes on an alternate route when businessman Arthur Curtis, unhappy with the stress of his work, finds his office to be the set of a movie. The director, his new wife, and his agent all claim that he is an actor Jerry Reagan, only playing the role of Arthur Curtis. Arthur rejects this premise and tries to find his way out, even finding his daughter, who does not know him in this world. After hearing the film has been cancelled, he rushes back to the set, which returns him to his normal life in office, but leaves the other world without their Jerry Reagan. Both of these episodes allow the protagonist to get the wish they want without thinking about it too much, but with very different reactions to their wishes. People Are Like All Over begins with a weird premise, being that Martians are the same as humans, having the same emotions and empathy for others. This comes from one of the astronauts about to be on the first mission to Mars. And then he dies, leaving the other astronaut alone. He leaves the ship to find Mars to have an atmosphere and also Martians that look exactly like humans, but with the ability to speak telepathically with each other. They take the astronaut and even build him a house based on memories in his mind. And on top of that weirdness, it turns out the house is just an exhibit for his zoo that he's now an attraction of. But at least he's not dead. I'm only going to give this a 4 for theming, but if it was the other guy who survived, I would give it a 5. Long Live Walter Jameson is about Walter Jameson, a man who is several centuries old. He was scared of death and asked an apothecary to make him immortal, and has since lived multiple lives, had multiple partners, and fought in several wars. Eventually, a former lover he had abandoned finds and kills him, freeing him of his self-imposed curse. Mirror Image is a shaky start to the next level. It's about a woman being replaced by a doppelganger, and ending with her being arrested for seeming to be crazy. On top of that, the doppelganger is not only real, but not the only one. The biggest thing holding this episode back from being a really good Twilight Zone episode is that there's no reason to have this doppelganger replace her. There's no explanation given besides her being like, oh, I read a book one time. If there was just any form of connection, I think it would have been a league above what it is now. In a strangely similar vein, The After Hours follows Marcia White and her strange experience in a department store. She takes an express elevator up to the 9th floor to find a golden thimble for her mother. The 9th floor, however, is completely empty besides one worker and the thimble she was looking for. She buys it and returns to the rest of the store, only to realize that the thimble is damaged. When she tries to explain her experience to the higher-ups, she's told there is no 9th floor, and then passes out after seeing the worker she bought the thimble from as a mannequin. When she wakes back up, it is after store closing, and the mannequins start talking.
Marcia. You remember Marcia?
Climb off it. Come on, dear. Marcia.
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 Turns out, Marcia is also a mannequin that spent a month living out in the real world. They say something slightly thematic about not knowing a difference after a while, but don't reference how widespread this mannequin ordeal is, so I'm going to put it at a 3 for the large scaleness of it, and move on. Escape Clause sees hypochondriac Walter Bedecker make a deal with
the devil from the Bible
in order to become impervious to disease and functionally immortal until he says he doesn't want to be immortal, all for the price of his soul. This causes him to lose all connection to humanity, not feeling any excitement or danger anymore. His reckless behavior leads to his wife's death, and he decides to take responsibility so he can try the electric chair. However, his lawyer is good enough to get him life in prison instead, condemning him to an immortality of cell walls. Bedecker calls on
the devil from the Bible
to take him from that outcome, giving him a heart attack instead, so he can chill in hell with this guy. What you need is akin to Mr. Denton on Doomsday, where a man, this time Fred Reynard, interacts with a fate-like person who gives him items he needs. However, unlike Denton, Reynard takes advantage of this man, using his items to win money and save his life. He threatens to hurt the man if he doesn't help every day of his life. This causes the man to trick Reynard into wearing 2 tight, slippery shoes, which leads to his death, being what the man needed. It shows how, even when using similar Twilight Zone gimmicks, the people who are put through them can create wildly different outcomes. Another comparable pair of episodes is The Hitchhiker and A Stop at Willoughby. Both have the exact same scores and tell the story of a protagonist on a journey trying to escape the life they have. Equally weird and centered solely on the protagonist, the main difference comes from their willingness to accept their fate. While Garth Williams fully accepts his stop and leaps at the chance to stop at Willoughby, Nan Adams constantly tries to avoid the hitchhiker and accept her death several thousand miles back. Walking Distance is another time travel episode, this time sans time machine. Martin Sloan takes a walk back to his childhood town only to find it exactly the same as he remembered. He later sees himself and realizes that he has traveled back in time. He tries to communicate with his parents, but they brush him off as a crazy person. This culminates at the carousel, where he tries to talk to himself, but his younger self runs away, breaking his leg, causing older him to have the same injury. His father eventually finds him and tells him that he needs to leave, how he needs to let the younger him enjoy his youth, and for him to find his own fun in the world he's in now. He returns to where he came, now with a bum leg and new memories. The next 2 episodes I really like because they show just how deep and introspective the Twilight Zone can be, while also having its weird moments. The Fever is a strong gambling addiction story following Mr. Gibbs, a once starch man, seeing the appeal of gambling after winning the slot machine once. He leaves, afraid of the machine, but that night he hears it call to him. He goes back to the machine to return the tainted money, only to spend the next 24 hours cashing checks and playing the slot machine. On his last dollar, the machine breaks, driving Gibbs mad. He accuses the machine of owing him $1, to the point of crashing out a window to his death. At the end, the casino removes the broken machine, allowing a single $1 to roll next to Gibbs' hand. is a tragic tale that many people fall into in real life, which makes it sad that the large-scale score is 1, just the average world. One for the Angels, while also sad, has a much more melancholic ending. Lou Bookman is a kind older man who is beloved by the children of his neighborhood. However, when death comes to take him away, he attempts to prolong his life, telling Death he has yet to make a great sales pitch, the titular One for the Angels. Death allows him to postpone his death, only to threaten the life of one of Lou's friends, a little girl. When Lou realizes it's either his life or the girl's, he holds Death from taking her, using his pitch for the Angels to save her life, only gaining a few minutes on the life he was originally going to have. A great tale of self-sacrifice and being able to find satisfaction in personal relationships rather than economic gain. Now, do you want to see something weird? Okay, there are these 3 astronauts who land on this asteroid. They go outside to find a farm just like Earth, except the dog and the human they see are frozen. They continue into town to find everyone frozen in time. The 3 split up to try to find someone, but no cigar, except... This leads them to try to figure out where to live for the time being, only to find a living person who explains that the asteroid is a glorified cemetery where people are taxidermied into their greatest dreams. We also learned that the atomic bombs went off during the Reagan administration, and it took humanity over 200 years to rebuild and be able to travel in space. Then, it's revealed that the living person is actually an old robot and the caretaker of the cemetery, killing the 3 astronauts and putting them back in their ship to pretend to launch back into space. And that's the it. That's all it is. That's Elegy, one of the episodes. How weird is that? I'll tell you, it's a 5 weird. There's no reason they're on the planet, there's no reason they had to die, why'd Reagan drop the bombs, too many questions, and no answers. Anyways, Time Enough at Last is the episode I mentioned previously to being the first episode I remember. In it, Henry Bemis is a banker who loves to read so much that is interfering with his work to the point that his boss threatens to fire him. The reason he doesn't just read at home is that his wife also despises him reading, but we're never given a real explanation as to why she hates him reading so much. This leads him to take his lunch break in the bank vault so he can read a newspaper in peace. While on his lunch break, the Cold War goes hot, leaving him to be the last person on Earth. He eventually finds his way out of the vault and to a library, where he realizes he has time enough at last to read as much as he wants, only for him to break his, once again, extremely thick glasses, condemning him to a world of near blindness. Everything in the story is definitely bad, but not really weird. The weirdest part being, why doesn't she let him read? We never get a good explanation for that. But let's go on to the last episode of this section. Judgment Night is a pretty simple and classic case of comeuppance. Carl Lanzer is a passenger on the SS Queen of Glasgow during World War II with a strange amount of knowledge of German U-boats and not much else. In his cabin, he realizes he is actually a Kriegsmarine officer running out on the deck from that shot. He sees a U-boat off the side, with him commanding it. Turns out that he was the officer who sank the passenger ship and now spends all of his afterlife reliving the sinking of the Queen of Glasgow over and over again. That's technically the 5th most Twilight Zone episode of Season 1, but there's one episode that I skipped over because it is so weird that I had to hold on to it to be a part of the final 5. So here it is, the 5 most Twilight Zone episodes of Season 1.
The home of Mr. Gregory West.
A World of His Own, the final episode of Season 1, follows playwright Gregory West as he reveals to his wife that he can create life. By speaking into his recorder with such passion and concentration, he can cause the characters he creates to come to life and interact with the world, and can easily destroy them by burning the tape containing their description. After his wife states multiple times that she's going to put him away in a home, he reveals that she herself is a character that he created and has kept as his wife. She doesn't believe him and accidentally burns her tape, deleting her from existence. Gregory decides that this is the perfect time to just marry a different woman he created and has been cheating on his wife with. Why he didn't just delete his wife and marry this new woman earlier? Beats me. This is a weird story on its own, but then actual creator of the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling, appears to close out of the episode, to which Gregory reveals that Rod Serling is also a fictional character that he created and destroys him as well.
Well, that's the way it goes.
This is something I did not expect so much that I wish I could give this an episode of 10 on the weirdness score. All this gets is an honorable mention here at the end.
A reminder to me that I'm so lonely I'm about to lose my mind.
The Lonely is about an AI girlfriend. So in this future, the world has exported criminals to live on asteroids alone, only getting contact with human every 3 months at supply drops. Corey, the criminal we follow, is given a mysterious box during one of the supply runs, and he opens it to find a robot that looks like a human woman. He chastises it for a while before he realizes the robot can feel. Why did they make the robot able to feel? He eventually falls in love with her and wants to spend his life on the asteroid with her. On the next supply run, however, Corey is told that the Earth governments have decided that imprisoning people on asteroids is cruel and are bringing everyone back to Earth, with the only issue that he can only bring 15 pounds worth of stuff on him. His robot girlfriend, however, is more than 15 pounds, and he has a massive crash out about how he's going to stay on with her on the asteroid for the rest of his life because she's real. The captain's response to this is to shoot the robot in the face, exposing her wiring, which somehow makes Corey realize, oh, she actually is a robot and not a human woman, and then return to Earth begrudgingly. It's a really weird episode, but only a 4 on the theme, because he doesn't choose to leave her or make the connection with her after she's shot. He just sort of goes with them after they say, okay, you gotta come with us.
It's the third planet from the sun, Bill.
Third from the Sun is the third most Twilight Zone episode, and like the other 2 to come, it starts off pretty normal. Will, our protagonist for the episode, gets off work with his colleagues, coming from making H-bombs, chemical warfare, and other deranged weapons of war. He talks to his colleagues about how the world is doomed and there's no way to stop it. He returns home and tells his family that he and his friend have a plan to leave the doomed planet by stealing an experimental ship and launching to a nearby planet that is habitable. Their decisions and journey create a really tense atmosphere as to whether or not they'll actually escape, eventually getting hounded by the government trying to stop them from arriving at the ship. The episode ends with them flying in a flying saucer away from their planet and to another, the third from the sun, which the inhabitants refer to as Earth. It combines the themes of those responsible for the chaos trying to find an escape with the individual fear of leaving a doomed world to an unknown planet, all for it not to be Earth all along. Great Twilight episode.
Because the last I saw of him, he was caught in a circle of 7 German planes.
I would argue that The Last Flight is the most conventionally told Twilight Zone episode of the season. In it, Lieutenant William Decker is flying over the skies of France in 1917, only to find himself landing in the modern year of 1959. After being questioned, Decker learns that his presumed dead flying companion, McKay, not only is alive in the year 1959, but is a war hero from both world wars and is arriving at the airbase the same day. After further questioning of Decker's story, he reveals that he was flying away from a battle that he left McKay in to die before he landed. Decker realizes the only way for McKay to survive is if he goes back to the fight and saves him from the Germans, which he does. When McKay, now Air Vice Marshal, arrives on the base, he recounts to the soldiers who question Decker how he thought he was abandoned by him during the battle, only for Decker to return and save McKay's life, costing his own. By all intents and purposes, it's a classic story of a man overcoming his fears and undoing a mistake he thought impossible to undo, with a little bit of time travel thrown into a mix. But by far, the most Twilight Zone episode of the first season is The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
That was the way they prepared things for the landing. They sent 4 people, a mother and a father and 2 kids who looked just like humans. But they weren't.
We open on Maple Street, a quiet road in a quiet suburb in America. All the residents look up and see a meteor fly closely above them. After a short bit, all the electronic devices stop working, and the neighbors gather around to corroborate their stories. 2 men planning on going into town to see how widespread the power outage is, but they are told not to by a teenager who warns that the monsters that were on the meteor will only let their own travel anywhere. This causes suspicion to grow amongst their neighbors on who might be a monster, whether it's the couple that recently moved in, or the man whose car suddenly started working, or the teenager who came up with the idea in the first place. They stand in the street and argue throughout the night until they see a shadow creeping towards them. One of the neighbors shoots the shadow, only to find a neighbor from across town checking on them. This sends the neighbors into a mass hysteria, blaming each other more aggressively than before, all of this accumulating to a really well-done critique of McCarthyism and how the paranoia of distrusting your neighbors can lead to self-destruction rather than a tightening of collaboration. How, when given the hint that there might be an outsider, it's easier to other those that you're afraid of instead of banding together. And actually, there are aliens cutting the power and driving the neighbors crazy. What? This episode leans so far in on the Red Scare metaphor that it made me forget that I was watching the Twilight Zone. It's not even like this is a one-off thing. The aliens state that they've done this all over the world, and everyone is going crazy. This is the best episode because it shows how the Twilight Zone warps everyone's perception. It takes a common fear of the time, inverts it to lull you into a false insecurity, and pulls the rug out from under you, revealing a 6-foot pit that somehow launches you into space. There you have it. All of Season 1 of the Twilight Zone ranked from least to most Twilight Zone. I hope you all enjoyed it, and keep a close eye on your surroundings. You never know when you might cross into the Twilight Zone. Also, seriously, why doesn't she want him to read?